Sports Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast. With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Brady Batista, give me the rock. Here it goes. Up and away. Slam jam bam. And now he does a little dance.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Today is Thursday, March 13th, 2025. It's my official duty to welcome you into episode 467 of the BuckeyeXtra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City, or welcome to whatever the opposite of that is in the Ohio State basketball world. I am here inside my hotel room out on the outskirts of Indianapolis, a couple of hours now removed from a 77-70 loss for Ohio State that drops the Buckeyes to 17-15 overall. It bounces the Buckeyes out of the Big Ten tournament after just one game. It significantly cripples, if not outright destroys, any chances of an at-large NCAA tournament bid for the Buckeyes, and opens up just a whole world of questions about what this offseason could look like for Ohio State. It's always jarring to go into a locker room immediately after something devastating or something ugly, like kind of what we saw today to an extent, takes place. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of stuff that comes with the finality of a season. And what made today so strange was that we don't know what kind of finality it was. And it's not even like last year where it was they lost to Illinois in the Big Ten tournament and you thought, well, they're almost assuredly not getting in the NCAA tournament. But it was like, well, would they play in the NIT? Do they want to play in the NIT? As I think about it, when we left Minneapolis last year, there was a lot more up in the air. Jake Diebler had not been named the coach at that point. Everybody's status for next year was in question. Certainly the NCAA tournament picture was muddy at best. So I guess maybe benefit of 2 or 3 hours of reflection here. It's not quite as uncertain as what Ohio State went through last season, but there's some weirdness to this because Ohio State won't play in the NIT. The Buckeyes will play, if they play in a postseason event, they would be contractually obligated to play in the college basketball crown. And I will have more on this here in the next day or two. But this is the new postseason event that will take place in Las Vegas from March 31st through April 6th. And the Big Ten is contractually obligated to send its top 2 teams in the net who are not selected for the NCAA tournament to the crown. Now, the fact that it doesn't take place until the end of March and the transfer portal will already be open certainly makes this odd. And I've had my questions about the tournament from the second I heard that it was announced. I don't feel like I have a better grasp yet on it because I was kind of waiting to see where Ohio State would go. Because really going into the Indiana game, I still very much believe that this was a team that was on the right side of the NCAA tournament bubble. And now I believe it is on the wrong side of the bubble and has no opportunities to improve its standing. And now almost certainly that's the postseason destination for Ohio State. Nobody in the locker room really seemed to have a very good idea what the heck the crown is. It had not been much of a point of conversation. And there still remains some quiet hope that this team will still receive an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament, although it did seem very muted in conversations. And so I think there will be, I'll do another podcast here, maybe Friday, now that it is already Thursday morning, but maybe something helping kind of set up what could happen next in another day or so. But right now I'm going to try to keep this as much on like the here and now, what the locker room was like, what happened in this game. And then the bigger picture stuff we'll save that for another podcast here in the not too distant future. But we do have a lot to get into here. Before we do, I want to remind you that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. If you subscribe, you'll automatically get the newest ones just as soon as our man Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, can grab them and publish them for you. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review, please click 5 stars, and please consider telling a friend. Thanks to everyone who's taking the time to do all those things, and thanks to Patriot Supporter 1976 for the 5-star review in the Apple iTunes store. Very much appreciated. Bosses love that kind of stuff, and I appreciate you, so thanks very much. So the other weird thing about like a game like this is that, and I've felt this for the last couple of games, where really like the specifics of the game don't merit a ton of inspection. I guess you're at a point in the year where it's either you win or you don't, and we're a little late in the calendar to really be identifying trends and trying to gather data on what the ceiling. We know what teams are at this point. We know what teams aren't at this point, and that makes like the really. I didn't ask like almost any game specific post game questions, because really like there wasn't too much that merited discussion. It was more like just in general, like, all right, you lost a game that you absolutely needed to win. How does that happen? And then like, now what? That was really like the gist of the post-game conversation. And I talked to a lot of players. The locker room is open in the Big Ten tournament, and spoke with John Mobley, Devin Royal, Bruce Thornton, Micah Parrish, Sean Stewart, Colin White, and I talked to Micah again. So I talked to him twice. And then we talked to Jake Diebler when that was all said and done. So lots of stuff here to write in the next 24 to 48 hours. Certainly a lot of unknown about what the next couple of days will be like, who will be doing what. We'll see kind of how this all plays out. But as far as this actual game goes, brutal start. I mean, just two teams that looked struggling. The two teams that struggled to score and struggled to do much of anything. The first field goal of the game came on a Quez Glover 3-pointer from the right corner with 14:57 left in the first half. So we played 5 minutes and 3 seconds, where Ohio State scratched out a 6-0 lead on the basis of a Devin Royal free throw, 2 John Mobley free throws, and then a Quez Glover 3-pointer. And then Iowa scored on the next possession. And then things kind of heated up. And after we had 2 field goals on the first 21 possessions, these teams combined to score on 17 of the next 20. And it was a stretch that gave me pause, because for as well as Ohio State's offense started to get moving, the defense was just as porous. And it was a second. It wasn't incredibly worrisome to me at that point, because this is an Iowa team that is among the nation's worst defensively. And I thought, okay, well, Ohio State's given up buckets, but they're going to keep scoring because Iowa is not a good defensive team. That, of course, proved to not be the case. And Ohio State, despite going on this run where it scored on 7 straight possessions, the game was 8-8. Iowa took an 11-8 lead. Ohio State scored in its next 8 possessions, and that ended with a Devin Royal putback that gave Ohio State a 26-24 lead. So you score an 8 straight, but you give up points on 6 of 7, and that's how you're only up 2. And then the offense got a little bit clunkier, and Iowa held the lead until a John Mobley 3-pointer with the possession started with 27.3 seconds left, but Mobley hit a 3 basically to end the first half, and Ohio State and Iowa were tied at 37. And I thought, okay, the first couple of minutes is going to be critical. Like, is this where Ohio State starts to pick apart Iowa's defense, or does Iowa keep scoring? Does the pressure rise on Ohio State? And it was the latter. Iowa came out, scored on its first 4 possessions of the second half. 3 of them, they got points from Peyton Sanford, who finished with 17 for Iowa. And at this point, or in this stretch, he had 7 of the first 9 in the second half. And that, to me, was a critical opening stretch, because the Hawkeyes were able to then build a little bit of a lead, and then maintain it right up until the point that Ohio State mounted a charge midway through the second half, and it was 57-50, Iowa up after a three-pointer from Josh Dix, and then Bruce Thornton draws a foul, hits 2 free throws. Ohio State's defense steps up here. Quez Glover comes up with a steal as the shot clock is winding down. Devin Royal spins through the lane and scores. It's 57-54. Glover commits a foul, but then Ohio State forces a 5-second violation on a baseline out of bounds play. Micah Parrish fakes a 3, which would have been wide open. He drives to the basket, finishes on the right glass. It's 57-56. Ohio State plays really good defense and forces a Josh Dix miss as the shot clock is about to expire. Bruce Thornton comes down, scores in the paint. It's 58-57. Ohio State's up 1, 8:48 to go. And you're thinking, like, is this the moment? Is this where they've battled their way back? They turned up the defense, got a couple of stops, but immediately Iowa gets a drive from the other Sanford, Price Sanford, who had 10 points off the bench. He drives and scores. Micah Parrish kind of chucks up a 3 that doesn't fall. Iowa comes down, gets another quick bucket from Price Sanford, back to a 3-point lead. Ohio State ties it on a Micah Parrish 3-point play. And I'm sorry for all the play-by-play here, but I feel like all this tells the story here. But then Ohio State comes down and defensively forces a 3-point miss from Peyton Sanford. But Aaron Bradshaw gets beaten for the offensive rebound. Continuing the possession for the Hawkeyes, John Mobley fouls. I don't know how to say his name. Laji Dembele, number 13, who finished with 8 points and 9 rebounds. And in this possession, he drew the foul, went to the line with 7:11 to go, and hit both free throws. Now, Ohio State would never lead again or tie the game from this point. But this is where the game, the number one talking point from the locker room was, to a man, every player that I talked to said that the Buckeyes were not the more connected team. Iowa was more connected. That was repeated consistently. It's the lead to my takeaways, which I would highly encourage you to go read. About 2,000 words out of this game. But that was the number one thing that was repeated in that locker room, that Iowa was the more connected team. To which, like, my follow-up is just, well, how does that happen when you have everything to play for? Like, you know the stakes of this game. You lose, you go home, you're essentially out of the NCAA tournament. How is Iowa the team that's more connected? Like, what does that mean? And essentially what they whittled it down to was that it means that this team, in those critical moments, let mistakes compound onto mistakes and did not move on to the next play quickly enough, and then did not communicate well enough to avoid perhaps overhelping, not helping enough, getting a defensive stop when you needed it, or taking a bad shot. And all of those things happen here in this next stretch where Ohio State's down 2 and has multiple opportunities to tie it, take the lead, build a lead. And what you get is Micah Parrish takes a baseline jumper that was forced fairly early in possession. I wrote down bad shot. Iowa comes down, misses a 3. Ohio State has the ball, and John Mobley just lets Price Sanford just rip the ball out of his hands. But then Iowa comes down, gets a wide open jumper from Brock Harding. His only miss of the game. Off the bench, 15 points, 5 of 6 from the floor. His only miss of the game. But then with 5:55 to go, Bruce Thornton drives, and Harding moves over, and they call a block. Or excuse me, they award Harding the charge and call it on Bruce Thornton, negating free throws for Bruce, who had 24 and 9. He was 7 of 7 from the free throw line. He had 4 turnovers, but one of them was this one. Could not help but think back to last year against Illinois in the Big Ten tournament, and Terrence Shannon Jr. with 4 fouls, driving like a madman right into, I think it was Zed Key, and instead of fouling out of the game, got the free throws, and that seemed like such a pivotal moment in that game. This was pivotal as well, and Jake Buehler had a long answer when I asked him block or charge. I'm not going to read it all to you right now, but negates a chance for Ohio State. But the defense still hangs in there. Devin Royal commits a foul on Josh Dix. He goes to the line for 1-on-1 and he misses. So Ohio State comes down, and this was the possession to me where Thornton gets fouled with 5:15 left. So that's 6 on Iowa, not 7. And as the possession continues, Evan Mahaffey has the ball essentially wide open. He is 4 feet from the rim. He's at the right block. And instead of taking a wide open game tying shot, he hurls the ball back out to the 3-point line. But there's nobody there. He misses Bruce Thornton, I think it was, by about 5 feet. Ball sails out of bounds. That is now Ohio State's third turnover in 2 minutes and 22 seconds since Iowa went up 2. And even still, Iowa misses a shot, and then Quez Glover forces up a jumper that doesn't fall. Iowa then finally breaks the stalemate. Josh Dix scores on a tough drive that makes it a 4-point game. Too many empty possessions, too many bad shots, too many turnovers, a foul or two too many, miss from a rebounding standpoint. And that's a whole sequence where Ohio State had multiple chances to tie the game, take the lead, build the lead. Instead, it's still down 2. And then when Iowa scores on 4 straight possessions, it's 72-65 with a minute 49 to go. And you're chasing. And they still almost tied it. Bruce Thornton's 3-point play with 59.6 seconds left cut it to 72-68. And then Ohio State forced a turnover on Harding, who wasn't prepared for Ohio State's full court pressure. So the Buckeyes get the ball back. Thornton hits a jumper. It's 72-70. And all Ohio State needs is a stop and a score. But they can't get it. And Brock Harding hits a 3 to give him 15 points on the night. 3 of 3 from 3. The Hawkeyes hold on. It was over from the minute that he hit that shot. And frankly, it was over from that stretch where Ohio State just couldn't find a way to get out of its own way and get a good shot or get a good whistle or get an important rebound. And that has just become, to me, like what this late game stretch has turned into for Ohio State. They're just unable to make those final 3 or 4 plays that they need to down the stretch. And there have been moments where that hasn't been the case. You know, it's pretty easy to just think back a week and a half ago. I think how this team beat Nebraska in double overtime. This team held off USC at USC. This team came back and beat Maryland at home. It came back on the road and beat Purdue. But then you look at these games, you look at Iowa, you look at Indiana, you look at getting blown out by Northwestern at home. You look at the Michigan game, losing by 3. It seemed to me that when this team won 3 straight at Purdue, home against Iowa, and then at Penn State, it just hit a roadblock at Illinois. And I think illness played a bit of a factor in that. I mean, Sean Stewart couldn't play. Devin Royal was questionable for that game. But Ohio State was 13-8 and 5-5 after winning at Penn State and led in the second half at Illinois and has closed the season losing 7 of 9. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry. 7 of 11. So my bad. That's a significant difference. But Ohio State goes 4-7 in its final 11 games and is what it is. I mean, this team has proven time and time again now that this is who they are, that this is a team that has a couple of really talented players, but does not have enough around those talented players that when one of them has a rough game or 2 of them have a rough game, it's fatal. You know, there's been no point in the season where we've talked about how, or certainly there's been no real point here in the last 2 months where we've talked about anybody off the bench coming in and making an impact. Not Evan Mahaffey, not Aaron Bradshaw, not Quez Glover, not Colin White. Injuries, illness, those things have all played a role to some of those guys to varying degrees. But one of the numbers that stood out to me when I was putting together the takeaways, Ohio State's bench was outscored 27-3 in this game. Quez Glover hits that 3 as the first field goal of the game, and then nobody else on Ohio State's bench scores again. So Ohio State's entire bench was 1 for 8 from the floor in 47 total minutes. And bench scoring, I've always been a little bit lenient, or reluctant rather, to really pinpoint that for a reason why a team may win or lose, because there's a reason guys are on your bench. And you look at Maryland, which is riding the Crab Five to just incredible heights and looks every bit like a juggernaut of a team the way its season has unfolded. Maryland doesn't rely on a bench at all. And maybe that's an Achilles heel, and that takes down the Terrapins earlier in the tournament than their seed might expect. But that's a Maryland team that played a heck of a season and is going to be in the tournament playing like those meaningful games. And I don't see Ohio State getting there. And you look at the last time Ohio State's bench outscored its opponent's bench was the win against Washington back on February 12th. It's like 22-20. And again, like what does that stat mean in a game that you win by 24 that's never close at home? Like, I don't know. But since that game, Ohio State's bench has been outscored 168-59. And during that stretch, Ohio State went 2-5. I don't think those numbers are unrelated. And I think on a night where Bruce Thornton does everything but install the kitchen sink at half court, he has 24 points on 8 of 13 shooting, 7 of 7 from the line, 9 assists. He did have 4 turnovers. He has 24. Micah Parrish has 16, granted 6 of 14 from the floor. And Devin Royal, I thought, played really well. He missed all 3 of his 3-pointers, but inside the 3-point line, 7 of 9, 3 of 4 from the line. He had 6 rebounds. But John Mobley had 8 points on 2 of 10 shooting. He was 2 of 8 from 3 and struggled. I thought this was a second straight game where he really looked like a freshman in a way that he didn't look like a freshman maybe a month or 2 ago. And it's a little bit like the Dwayne Washington role a couple years ago, where he can hit some daggers for you, but he also has the capability, like he did tonight, of going 2 of 8 from 3. And when you go back to losing at Indiana, he was 1 of 8. So you're talking 3 of 16 from 3 in these last 2 games. And this is not singling out John Mobley for why is Ohio State losing these games that it needs to win to make the NCAA tournament. But it's also a reminder as we sit here that this is a team that so much of the summer and the fall was geared around Bruce Thornton and Meechie Johnson, and Meechie playing a significant role in this team, and Mobley certainly playing an important one, but not having to be relied on at quite the level that he has had to be. Another ripple effect that continues to impact this Ohio State team in a pretty significant way. And I think you factor, or you take that, and then you add on the fact that this team didn't really get a whole lot from its front court once again. Now, I should give Aaron Bradshaw some credit here. I've been hard on him. He had 6 rebounds in this game. So that's certainly an improvement based on what he's given Ohio State consistently during the season. I thought he at least battled a little bit more on the glass than we've seen recently, because 6 rebounds is more than he's had in his last 4 games combined. In Bradshaw's last 3 games, 1, 1, and 1. He missed 2 games with the flu. Before that, 1 in the loss to Michigan, 3 against Washington, 4 in the loss to Nebraska. Missed the Maryland game, also sick. So rebounding has been a major issue for Bradshaw, certainly this season. The 6 rebounds are tied for second most. He had 6 in the loss to A&M. He had 8 in the win against Youngstown State. But just the other thing that I look at when I look at his stat line is that he's 7-1. He had 6 rebounds. He was 0 of 4 from the floor. And there were at least 2 possessions where they got the ball to Aaron Bradshaw down low, and he is right by the bucket. All he needs to do is put it in the bucket, but he takes that ball from high up above his head and pounds it on the ground for a power dribble in the middle of traffic, and then has a shot altered, has a shot blocked, loses the ball, Well, he was not credited with the turnover. But when you're that big and you have the ball above other people, it's like I'm trying to remember what game it was where he got the ball on the block and then just lowered his shoulder. It was in Illinois. That was it. He got the ball on the block, lowered his shoulder, and was called for a charge on a guy who was like a foot shorter than him. Like, those very seemingly straightforward basketball plays continue to give Aaron Bradshaw fits on the offensive end. And maybe that wouldn't be the case if he hadn't had to be away from the team for as long as he had. But he was also away from the team for as long as he was away from the team. And then you have the illness. He's clearly not taking the step that they needed him to. And when you look at this game, and this is my final point here, is Sean Stewart in 15 minutes, 2 points, 4 rebounds, 0 for 4 from the free throw line, 1 turnover. Aaron Bradshaw, 0 points, 6 rebounds in 16 minutes. We never saw Ivan Yagovin. I don't know. I could not have imagined him making an impact in this game. Austin Parks was not with the team because he's sick. Ohio State's front court once again just let it down. And Devin Royal does his best, and I thought played his most significant game here in the last couple of weeks. They were able to establish him in the paint at times and let him drive and let him draw contact and get to the rim. But this team needs somebody who can post up, who can do some things down low, who can command attention, and it just doesn't have it. And that has to be like priority 1 when this team hits the transfer portal and when they look at what this roster needs for next year. And there's certainly some that's predicated on, well, can you keep the guys you want to keep? What does Bruce Thornton do? I mean, that's obviously like the biggest question mark about next season, I would think, just because he could be a 4th-year guy, and you never know how these things will go, especially if this team misses a tournament for the 3rd straight year. Does that impact his thoughts on a 4th year at Ohio State? He didn't really say a whole lot other than he's just thinking about trying to support his guys as best he can. Sean Stewart did speak affirmatively about planning to be back next year. So did John Mobley. I don't think that really got brought up with anybody else, but and Colin White did talk about like hoping to be a team captain eventually, and what he learned from like Mobley and from Parrish this year. But that's the long and short of like what I saw sitting here inside Gamebridge Fieldhouse on a Wednesday afternoon. I'm going to get to a couple of your thoughts here now before we wrap this up. It is 1 a.m., which is a pretty decent song by the Subways, if any of you are familiar with that. I didn't go full OAR this time because it's not 3 a.m. But all right. So right off the top, okay, Sean C. said Bruce Thornton deserves to play NCAA Tournament basketball. Roddy's going to. Felix is going to. Unfortunately, I hope Bruce leaves to ensure he'll participate in an NCAA tournament. Jerry B. As an OSU b-ball fan since 1957, this is one of the most disappointing seasons I've ever seen. Not that I thought they would be world beaters, but more competitive and being able to get positive results of that competitiveness in a high percentage of their games. Say 24-8 or slightly better. They played hard for the most part, and I didn't see players giving up, but way too much pressure was put on their smallish guards to score, handle the ball, control the game, all while having to play too many minutes because they weren't deep there after Michi left. I love Royal, but he is a mid-range. He's a mid-range inside game despite at 6'6", often going up against bigger, stronger players. Hasn't shown he's an effective three-point shooter, and until he does, he needs to work mostly inside. Okay, so here Jerry's got, and I haven't checked this, but he said totaling all 4 of the big guys, 6'9" and taller, minutes, not games because they all missed some. Those 4 averaged 36.4 minutes, 11.1 points, 8.7 rebounds, 1.7 blocks, 1.5 turnovers, and 6.1 fouls. They need to get more production. Were the highly touted transfers really any better? Makes me question either their ability to evaluate talent or coach them to better success. All right, so Jerry, shout out to you because this is an incredibly detailed, lengthy text, and we could probably devote a whole podcast to it. There will be lots of time in the offseason to certainly evaluate the Stewart Bradshaw production compared to Okpara Key. Honestly, we could have the same conversation about Roddy Gale and Michi Johnson. But no, clearly they didn't get what they wanted from those sophomore front court players. Neither of them took the consistent scoring contribution step that this team needed for it to realize its potential. And you're seeing that now. Like, that is a huge part of the reason why this team is what it is. Doug H just said, I'm wondering who comes back. We're not far from those being the main discussions. And we might honestly get some of that figured out here these next couple of days. I think if this team decides, does everybody play? Do some guys decide not to play? Like, there's a lot of unknown at this moment. Danny G said, tough season all around. Let's retool and look forward to next year. Brad K said, if I hear the word connected one more time, good Lord, should be a drinking game. Yeah, I got to that point as well. And certainly here post game where every player that I talked to brought it up. I don't feel like that really told us a whole lot about the Jake Diebler's answer, explaining it a little bit more that you can read in the takeaways. I thought that summed it up a little bit, but like if being more connected isn't a criticism of toughness and togetherness and all that stuff, then it certainly felt a little confusing. Yeah, okay. Sean L is in the same boat here. He said, there's that word again. Tired of cliches. If we cannot get connected for games like that, perhaps we do not have the right type of players. And several more, like Stephen K, really tired of hearing the word connected. Carl F, more connected. Good Lord. Trent R, did they say why Iowa was more connected? What does that even mean? Iowa wanted more. That's all there is to it. I did think Iowa played with more freedom. I thought Ohio State got tight in a couple of situations. And I just keep thinking that, like, there's just not enough on this roster right now. Just the way this season has unfolded, the way the depth hasn't developed, the way we've already discussed Stewart and Bradshaw. You know, Wes Glover was never really supposed to play a ton. You know, he was supposed to be behind Bruce, Michi, Junie, and then Michi leaves, and that's how you end up with Quez Glover having to play as much as he did. He gave them a little bit defensively at times, but really struggled offensively and had an uncanny ability to take a medium difficulty shot and turn it into a difficult shot. Evan Mahaffey took like 3 steps backwards this year. And could really it was hard to keep him on the floor at times. And I felt like, Colin White didn't get to have a full year. He was in and out with injuries. So that I think there's some useful stuff there. And I'm interested to see what he looks like next season. But I think about, I don't question this team's toughness. Like it's not that to me. They're just not good enough. I guess that's where we are. This team just has proven itself over the course of 32 games while going 17-15 and racking up some impressive wins, but just never was able to consistently figure it out and have enough going for it to put together a streak. I was thinking about this after Ohio State beat Nebraska in double overtime, and you're thinking, okay, well, beat Indiana and win a Big Ten tournament game and you're in. Ohio State's never won more than 3 games in a row all season. So to think you got a 2-game win streak, go win at Indiana and then win a Big Ten tournament game, they hadn't done that all year. Tall ask. All right. How long have we gone here? We're almost to 40 minutes. I'll get to a few more of the thoughts here from our texters. A couple new names here, which is cool to see. Graham G. Unfortunately, this is how I thought they would play. I was hoping I was wrong. When they lost to Northwestern, that was the death knell. No good team would lose that game at home. I would push back just slightly on that because Northwestern, a little bit sort of similar to Ohio State 2 years ago when the Buckeyes were lost 14 of 15 and then won a couple of games late and had that Big Ten tournament run. But like Northwestern winning at Ohio State, winning at Minnesota, beating Iowa at home, and then a 4-point loss at home to UCLA, and then lost at Maryland, but then won earlier today, beat Minnesota in the first round of the tournament, and we'll play Wisconsin on Thursday. They're Wildcats are still fighting, and you still need to win that game, and you still can't lose that game by 21, 4 days removed from battling Michigan right down to the wire. But yes, that Northwestern game was troubling, and illness and the sickness and all that stuff, sure, but to lose by 21 at home like that was not a good look. You're right, Graham. I'm with you there. All right, one or two more of these here as I try to get the website to load. Robert W. put the season to rest. Go back to the drawing board because it didn't work this season. Brian B. It appears we're tight. Iowa played loose as our big three shot 21 of 39. Other six were 4 for 20. Ronald M. The offense seems incoherent. I just don't understand the half-hearted screening, penetration into the lane without any passing or dribbling 8 or 9 times first. When Jake was hired, many former players were excited. Could you check back in with them to see how they feel now? There will be time in the offseason to do more evaluation and certainly to get more of a temperature on things. I guess, here, one or two more. Because Jane H., who's a very loyal texter and listener and reader, I'm so disappointed in this team, especially the bench. I'm sick of watching Bradshaw put in on the floor and turn it over. Sick of watching Mahaffey work his butt off not to shoot. Sick of watching Glover put up the dumbest looking shot possible. I'm disappointed in them and for them. I really thought they were better than this. Well, Jane, we're on the same page with a lot of that. You put it a little bit more bluntly than I did, but there's just a lot of guys in this team that just have struggled at a pretty high level like that. And Ronald M., to your point about the offense seeming incoherent, I think Ohio State's got to figure something out to the numbers tell us that this is not that bad of an offense. And maybe that in itself isn't a high enough bar. Ohio State right now, 31st in adjusted offensive efficiency, which is from a points per 100 possessions standpoint, this is the best offense that Ohio State has had since the 2020-21 team that lost to Oral Roberts, but it didn't matter. And it just feels like things are stagnant, things get slow, things get bogged down, and they just don't, there's not a lot of movement. And I don't know if that's do you need to retool the system? Is that a player thing? I think there's some pointed questions for this offseason because really so much of this, the first half of the season was trying to figure out what the heck they have, dealing with, Bradshaw's gone and he's back and then Michi's gone. And what do you have? It was a very discombobulated start for a rebuilt roster and a completely new coaching staff. And then by the time you get to January, February, especially with this team's lack of availability throughout the year, but even without that, you can't really wholesale change who you are. And I wrote about that the talk leading in was just you have to be a couple of possessions better. You can't drastically morph what your offense is, but you can examine that in the offseason and you can come up with a plan to be different next year and be more varied and to generate better looks. And I've got to think that that's a big offseason point. And I also think, again, how much we talked about Michi and what his role was supposed to be on this team and how much time spent, going back to my point from a second ago, you spent with a whole new roster, whole new coaching staff. You're spending all this time figuring these things out, identifying what you do well and who does what. And then that all gets thrown to the curb 10 games in. That's a tough deal. That's a hard adjustment. And if you want to assign blame there, we still haven't heard from Michi. Until he shares what or how much he wants to share of whatever mental health issues have led him to leave the team. I don't know. I don't know. But I do know that his absence was a significant blow to this team. even if he hadn't performed to the level that was expected when he signed with the Buckeyes. So I think it's probably a good place to end this one. It's almost 1:30, and I need to write another thing about the crown and about what comes next and what this is. So I apologize for everyone that I didn't get to your thoughts, because I got so many, and I do apologize for not being able to get to all of your thoughts. But man, it is awesome after a game to hear from so many of you. The conversation, the back and forth that we have and via the texting, I really enjoy it. I really appreciate hearing from all of you. Those of you that are invested enough to be part of this, you're the ones that make this job so cool. And I want you all to know how much I genuinely appreciate all of our interactions, because you're the ones that this is all for. And I feel for all of you on a night like tonight, where you just want to see your team win. Like, you just want to see your team have its name called on Selection Sunday, go back to the tournament, enjoy the fun and the success, and to be as close as this team was for so much of the season, and then barring something crazy, not make it. That's tough. And so I want you to know, if you're listening to this, how much I appreciate you. And especially if you're a subscriber, a texter, all those things. So thank you to everyone that does that. So good time for me to get out of here. Probably makes sense to do another podcast here in another day or two. So look for something on your feed before long. But as always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardy@dispatch.com. Thank you for listening. Thanks to Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, for putting this together. Yeah, we'll see what these next couple of days bring. But until then, be kind, take care, go outside. If you're in Central Ohio, it's supposed to be a gorgeous week. I'm going to get to the baseball diamond on Thursday afternoon with my kids and go outside and enjoy the weather, breathe the fresh air, and just manifest a little positivity into the world. So I encourage you all to go do the same, and then we'll see what happens with this basketball team. So be kind, take care. We'll talk soon.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.